Good evening, America, and welcome into the inaugural, did I say that right? Inaugural episode of the Skinscast. My name is Chris. Obviously, I'm a Washington Redskins fan, have been for my entire life, which has spanned 45 years. I started keeping up with the Redskins in 1981, probably when I was old enough to really sit through a football game and thoroughly enjoy it. That was Joe Gibbs' first year. So you could say I grew up with excellence and have aged and matured with mediocrity to a great degree. But I love these guys. I love the Washington Redskins. So sue me. This show's very, very simple. We're just going to talk about the Redskins. Do it game by game. We're not going to go crazy in depth. I'm just going to give you my impressions of the games, what storylines interested me, and we'll see how it goes from there. Now, for those of you who have followed Patrick and I for the last year and almost a half on the Steelskin show, which we thoroughly enjoy doing, Patrick is still producing my podcast, so shout out to bruh. We just decided to kind of take things in a little bit of different directions, make things a lot more targeted, a lot more specific, and we'll see how it goes. So if you want to transfer your allegiance from the Steelskin show to the Skinscast show, I would be greatly appreciative. With all of that out of the way, we're just going to get right into this thing. The Redskins played the Eagles last night in a game that for a game that took place only 6 games into the season, there were some pretty big stakes riding on it. Had the Redskins been able to win, they could have stayed pretty viable as a contender for the NFC East. A loss obviously gives the Philadelphia Eagles a 3-game lead over the Redskins, and what's more, a tiebreaker because they've swept the season series from the Skins. Folks, the Eagles were a better football team coming into this game, and they showed that they're still the better football team coming out of it. That's tough to say. It's tough to hear, but it's just the truth. The Eagles are a better team. With that said, I'll talk about the defense first. I thought by far this was their worst game really since the first Eagles game. Coming into this game, the Redskins had really 2 things they had to do if they were going to keep control of the Eagles' offense. Number one, they had to deal with Carson Wentz in off-schedule playmaking. They didn't do that again tonight. They struggled in a huge way. They did get 3 sacks, which was nice, but just too many times he made plays under duress, and that's what makes this kid incredibly special. So that's a tough order for any defense. The Redskins struggle with that. The other thing was third down. The Eagles came into this game just over 50% in third down conversions, and they went 6 for 11. So they pretty much stayed with their percentages. The Redskins started off pretty well in third down situations, but as the game progressed, they struggled more and more. The more they were on the field, the more they struggled. I thought our D-line was fantastic in this game against the run. No complaints at all at how the Redskins handled LeGarrette Blount. A couple of runs by Wendell Smallwood made me want to throw up a little bit, just the way they broke tackle. He kind of kept his legs churning. Redskins didn't tackle real well. But overall, a very good game against the run. And, I want to take a break here because it's going to sound like I'm bashing the Redskins defense. There's no question we are times better against the run than we have been over the last 3 years. So I want to say at the outset, Greg Minuski said they wanted to be a physical team up front and they wanted to smash teams in the mouth in the run game. And they're doing that for the most part. They are times better than they have been over the past 3 seasons. So this game was not about the Redskins being weak on the run. I think where they struggled was keeping Carson Wentz in the pocket. This is the second time in 3 games. You remember Alex Smith really gave the Redskins a hard time in the Chiefs game a couple of weeks ago. Getting outside contain, gashing them for big yards. He scrambled, set up the big play for the winning field goal. And again, And this game really thought the team struggled keeping him in the pocket when they had him. Several times he escaped. I think to me, the play of the game for the Eagles was that 18-yard scamper on 3rd and 8, where it looked like, he was just swallowed up in a mound of humanity and found a way out. That was just, Chet and I, my son, he's a big Redskin fan too, we just looked at each other, shook our heads. Like, what do you do? What can you do with that? Thought linebacker play overall was pretty solid. Mason Foster gave up a big pass to Zach Ertz, which that's a mismatch. The Redskins, I'd much rather see Zach Brown matched up man-to-man if you're going to go that direction. But Zach Ertz doesn't need to be isolated man-to-man with really anybody linebacking-wise with this team. So I was a little surprised that happened, but you knew at some point Ertz was going to begin making plays. Zach Brown, this guy has had a profound impact in the run game. He had a sack and a half in this game. He continues to show us what good linebacking is and how much we've missed it here. Dude's a beast. He gave up a touchdown pass, but he had great coverage. I have no complaints with the coverage. That throw that Carson Wentz made, again, shows you why this guy is separating himself week by week, why he's separating himself from the pack and really making a move towards the upper part of the quarterbacking world. He didn't even get full extension on his arm. Still made a great throw. Absolutely great throw. I thought that our secondary... And I guess this is what's frustrating, because if you look at it just position by position, I don't think it was an awful football game. I thought Quentin Dunbar played another solid game in the place of Josh Norman. This dude's a gamer. I mean, he fights, he scraps. He did get called for a big pass interference penalty. You had very poor technique. Didn't get his head around at all. Was not in a position to make a play on the football. But he came right back, a couple plays later and had a pass defense. I think the guy plays, and really, I want to take a moment to say that I'll be the first to admit that when we were doing our preseason cuts, talking about them, I really felt like Dunbar had plateaued and wasn't really sure if he should make the roster or not. And that's just another example of why I am behind a microphone and not in the press box doing anything meaningful for my football team. Bashaud Breeland, this dude's going to get paid next year. If he could come up with a few interceptions in these last 10 games, this dude's going to make bank. And I hope we're the ones that sign him. But he continues to just impress me this year on all levels. He's playing on a bad MCL. Jay Gruden said he's like Gumby. He heals quick, and that's not a lie. I mean, the dude was out there, and he was balling. I do think the Eagles got some they had, got the quick game going a little bit. And the biggest plays, again, we talked about the Zach Ertz play. I think it was like a 49-yard play or so. And then the 64-yard touchdown pass to Hollins. DJ Swearinger bites on a double move, and it's a mismatch situation anyway to have the corner out there on a wide receiver. But in that situation, Swearinger needed to stay deep, didn't need to let Hollins get behind him, and he did, and it cost them. That particular play, too, the Redskins did not have any pressure on Wentz, which was one of the few times I thought throughout the game the pressure was solid on Wentz. He just handles it well. He just does. I mean, the dude just continues to make off-schedule plays. He makes plays with people in his face. I just came away thoroughly impressed with that guy. But again, the Redskins continue to struggle late in halves. Teams seem to get what they need, and at some point they've got to stop that. That's become a trend. The 49ers did it to them at the end of both halves in that game. It almost cost the Redskins the game. The Kansas City Chiefs, the Redskins did such a good job through a quarter and a half or so, and then all of a sudden, you're back in it. This game, halfway through the second quarter, it's a 10-3 football game. You blink, it's 24-10, 3 straight touchdowns. And so they're not doing a good job in 2-minute, 4-minute, however you want to divide it up, they're struggling in those parts of the game. Is that a function of some injuries piling up? I don't know. I thought the Redskins handled not having Jonathan Allen pretty well. Didn't see quite the push interiorly that we have before, but I thought it was another solid game from Ron Kerrigan. He came away with half a sack. Junior Gillette was in on half a sack. Still waiting on Gillette to explode. Would still love to see Junior Gillette explode. But overall, I feel like the pressure packages are better than last year, but we're just missing that little bit of it's hard to put your finger on. I don't know what it is, but we're just missing the ability to get ourselves off the field in key situations. Now, some of that is because the offense, as the game progresses, really seems to struggle to stay on the field. There's a little window, seems like between halfway through the second and midway through the third, where the offense just can't seem to put a drive together and stay on the field and help the defense out. So I'm not trying to lay this completely at the defense, but clearly the Eagles' offense and Carson Wentz mainly, he's just that much better right now than anything we're able to throw. Anything we're able to throw at him. So thankfully we're done playing them, but that doesn't mean this schedule doesn't get easier from here on out. But anyway, again, I thought it was the defense's worst game since the first Eagle game. But with that said, I still feel like we're a much better unit. Even with the injuries, I feel like we're still a viable unit. Offensively, man, there has been so much said in the Twitterverse and other outlets about, oh man, Kirk cost us the game. Folks, I don't know what y'all watched. Kirk Cousins didn't cost the Redskins this game. Kirk Cousins kept them in this football game. That drive in the fourth where we scored to make it 24-17, that was a gutsy drive. I mean, it just was. I mean, he runs again, picks up a first down, and you say, okay, what's the big deal about that? Well, he's just more comfortable moving in and around the pocket. I thought he threw some dimes in this game. The Vernon Davis catch on the first drive, the Jamison Crowder, he had another one. But, against the 2 deep, the touchdown passes to Jordan Reed were fantastic. And I'll probably come back to this in just a second, but it was nice to see Jordan Reed emerge in this game. And I felt like, early he just didn't look like he was comfortable at all. But as the game went on, you saw them really targeting him, and it was great to see him targeted in the red zone. And the guy can produce. They've got to keep doing that. I guess the two things I had a problem with Kirk in this game, obviously the interception, I'm not going to put on him completely because his arm did get hit. When you watch the replay from the end zone, and I'm not sure what he saw where he was going with the football. Now, maybe he was going for, I think it was an out-breaking route. I can't remember if it was Dotson or Crowder. Maybe somebody can comment and tell me. I can't remember right now who that was. But it looked like that was the defender had undercut that route. So I'm still not sure where exactly he was going with the football there. But to say that his arm did not get hit and to say that didn't cause the interception isn't right either. So I thought that his I thought his pocket presence was fine. There were 2 sacks that he took that I was very, very unhappy with because I felt like, he took 1 sack. I'm sorry, 1 sack and 1 interception. I mean, 1 incompletion. But they really struggled in those with the double A-gap blitzes, the all-out blitz that the Eagles put on them in those 2 situations. And it looked like one was the 3rd and 2 where Jordan Reed was out on the edge blocking. I don't know who sets that up. But it was clearly a slide protection to the right, and I'm just not sure why Kirk did not make a side adjustment there and say, okay, we need to slide left, or I'm not sure what he saw, or maybe he just didn't see that and was so locked in on the play itself. But something there schematically went wrong, and it went bad. It went really bad. The next one is the play where his arm got hit. The ball hung up. Very easily could have been picked. But it was a similar situation. On those, the thing that struck me about that play is the Redskins had nobody. It looked like was on a hot route. And again, I don't know if that is an audible that Kirk's got to get to and that he's got to alert to that, or maybe did somebody run a wrong route? I don't know. I don't pretend to know. But those are little things that you have to account for when you see a team and you know this team is going to blitz you on 3rd and 5 or more. That's just what that's what Schwartz does. I did feel like structurally there are some plays that could have been better. But overall, folks, I mean, Kurt, and I don't even think that last touchdown that he threw to Jordan Reed, I wouldn't call that garbage time. That wasn't that. You're still fighting, trying to stay in a football game. So I was happy with the way he played. For the second straight time that the Redskins have played the Eagles, though, the run game has been really just kind of thrown in there. I remember saying after the first Eagle game that it did not seem to have any cohesion in the game plan. And I kind of felt like this in this one. It just felt like an afterthought. And I understand the Eagles have the best run defense in the league. They're averaging under 70 yards a game. They give up under 70 yards a game. You're not going to make your living running the football on the Eagles. But the Redskins coming into this game led the NFL in rushing attempts, and it's a formula that has worked for them. So it was really kind of disappointing to see them go away from that, because two things slow down an aggressive defense. Number one, running the football. And number two, screens. So we did not do a good job of presenting them a run game that they had to think about. So I was a little disappointed in that scheme-wise. Trying to think, I think Chris Thompson was the leading rusher again. Really, you could have made an argument that he probably could have got the ball more. Rob Kelly didn't look bad running the football, I didn't think. But, again, I just feel like this team needs to run the football more because it sets so much of their play action up, and it helped. And again, especially against the Eagles because of how aggressive they are up front. I guess the last thing I want to talk about, next to the last thing I want to talk about. Right now, it is incredibly obvious the deficit right now we are running at receiver in terms of production outside. Terrell Pryor did not enter the game until the second half. And I don't have a problem with that. His first pass that went to him was, you guessed it, a drop. He also dropped another one over the middle. Right now, I think Terrell Pryor is in his own head too much. I think, so many Instagram videos got posted in the offseason. We got so hyped up on the work this guy puts in. And this guy puts in the work. But right now, I just think he's thinking too hard about it. It's just nothing he's doing is natural. He's nowhere near as technical a receiver as we need him to be right now. We just didn't miss him when he wasn't in there. And I think that's a pretty clear evidence that something's wrong. Josh Dotson played the majority of the game for the first time this season. 3 catches for 39 yards. There's still growth going on. You have to keep in mind, this is his rookie season. He got very little done last year because of the injury. So we're watching a guy who is seeing things for the first time to a great degree. The other thing that's interesting and depressing to me, we're not winning on the outside. Our receivers aren't winning routes. Some of that, again, is Dotson's learning. Terrell Pryor is not a technical guy. Ryan Grant is a good route runner. He does not have great speed, and he is not a big physical guy. So he's got to win with his feet and his route running, and sometimes he does that, sometimes he doesn't. We miss Pierre Garçon in a huge way. I remember talking last season on the podcast about how when you watched Pierre Garçon run routes last year, constantly shoulders over toes. And what that means is, man, he is selling routes hard. He's running his out routes just as hard as he was running a post, or just as hard as he's running a fade. This guy is attacking the route. And that creates its own kind of separation. And we don't have that right now on the outside with those guys. And that brings up an interesting point because Jay Gruden has got to find a way to scheme around the fact that we're not getting a lot of production on the outside, so you have to find ways to get production on the inside. And he's done that beautifully with Vernon Davis, who has been unbelievable this year down the field. He had 2 more what I would call big plays for them on the opening drive and then later in the game. Chris Thompson has picked up the slack. Now, in this game, he had 5 catches, but for only 26 yards. I was very impressed with how the Eagles handled him in the open field off the screens in the second half. Flew to the ball, they were aggressive, and they tackled, and they didn't get sucked in and missed that first wave of tackles. I'm hoping, again, that the outside presence develops as the season goes on, but the real challenge going forward for Gruden and Matt Cavanaugh is designing a game plan that can still be aggressive, but you have to use what's working. Hopefully Jordan Reed, this is kind of a stepping stone game, and you can get him back in there because teams can live off this. The other guy that I'm still trying to figure out is Jamison Crowder. He had a 20-yard catch on the opening drive in this game, and then he just kind of disappeared. Really kind of buffaloed by that. It just seems like it's all of a sudden hard to get him the football. But if you notice, defenses are playing hard man coverage. They're not really getting a lot. You're not seeing a ton of open looks on the underneath routes, and those are the kind of things where if you're gonna do that, then it puts Cousins in a situation where he's probably less comfortable than we'd like him to be as far as being consistently able to make tight window throws in those situations. But again, be very interested to see going forward how the Redskins how the Redskins scheme this offense with what they're not getting on the out with the fact that they're not generating big plays down the field on the outside. It's not an ideal situation at all, but they still are they're still being productive. I guess there were 3 third downs that really stunk in this game. It was the 3rd and 2. We've already talked about that one, and there were 2 3rd and 1s. This gets back to not running the football, and they didn't run on any of the 3 3rd and 2 or less. And they did not run a single play in those. They passed in all of them. One of the completions was to Jordan Reed for negative yards. Jordan Reed didn't even get anywhere close to enough depth. And don't understand that route. Don't understand why that concept was even there. The next one was an incomplete on an out-breaking route to Jamison Crowder, who did have the depth, but was well covered. Kirk was a little wide with the throw, but it's still – I don't understand why you wouldn't work the middle of the field in those situations. I really don't understand the concepts there that they were going after. So, again, those are the types of things. I think that's where I talked about the defense being in a situation where at the end of the half they're struggling. The offense is struggling at the end, between like the middle of the second quarter, middle of the third quarter. But those third down plays to me are indicative of the struggle is convert a couple of those, stay on the field, and maybe you get that drive. Instead of being up 10-3, you're up 17-3. The Redskins just haven't developed a killer instinct to really put their foot on the throat of a team. They left some points on the board against San Francisco. It came back to bite them. You felt like they left some points out there against Kansas City, allowed them back in the football game. So they've got to develop a killer instinct and maybe get that one more score that really could alter what the other team's having to do. If they can do that, we could surprise some people down the stretch. I don't think this season's over. We're 3-3, folks, not 0-6. We could be the New York Giants. I do feel like the next 2 games, we can't be any worse than 4-4 at halfway and still be in it. If we're 3-5, I really think it's going to be tough. I think it's going to be tough to make the playoffs. I think if we're 4-4 or even better, 5-3, we're squarely in it. We're playing for a wild card for all intents and purposes, but you can't really think like that if you're the team. We can sit here and talk about it all day long, but the Dallas game becomes huge. But then I guess the last part of that I want to talk about are the injuries, because right now, folks, we are getting hit hard. That's an understatement. Last night, Morgan Moses sprained not one but two ankles, and the guy still came back in and finished the game. Dude, he is such a beast. Brandon Sheriff has a grade 2 MCL sprain, which is actually a good report because he could possibly play Sunday. Right now, Brandon Sheriff is better than anybody else on this offensive line interiorly. So having him in the game would be massive. And then you come to Trent Williams, and Jay Gruden did say that they're going to have to talk about rest. They're going to have to talk about trying to figure out if him continuing to play exposes him to further injury. You know, if you haven't heard, he's got the tendon that holds, or the ligament that holds your kneecap in place is torn. It's an incredibly painful injury. I don't know how the guy's getting around, let alone playing at the level he's still playing at. But I do think you do kind of feel like at some point we're going to lose him. When that happens, that's a void that is going to be so tough to replace. But clouding that is the fact that we're still missing Ty Nsekhe with the core muscle injury. If we could somehow... If we could make it through the next couple of games, because it's reported that Nsekhe still isn't going to be ready for a couple more weeks. So if we could get through that and get to Nsekhe in a couple of weeks, then you maybe could see some light at the end of the tunnel there. But right now, this offensive line is just kind of in flux. TJ Clemming scares me to death. Everything about him when I watch him scares me to death. I just think long term it's really gonna struggle with him. Chase Roulier actually came in because Spencer Long went out for a few plays. He came in and ended up finishing at guard when Sheriff went down. This is really going to test Callahan's abilities as an offensive line coach to try to keep things afloat and keep the offense viable. So that going down the stretch is going to be huge. And then obviously the injuries we've endured in the secondary continue to play out. So we're having a lot of just some of them are nitpicky little injuries. Some of them are serious, and it's, it does have an effect. It does have an effect. When you're having to bring, 2 and 3 guys in at one position during the course of a game, bringing guys in cold, it affects your continuity. It's not an excuse, and Gruden wouldn't let it be an excuse, but it is a storyline that has really colored these first 6 games. And you kind of feel like by the law of averages, we'll kind of run out of this at some point. But I'm hoping that, I would rather see them sit Trent Williams. I'm getting to a point where I'm just nervous about him really messing that knee up. I mean, right now it's a cut and dried. You fix it. It's a 5 to 6 month recovery. There's no way you could beef if the Redskins said, look, we've got to shut this guy down. Does that happen? I don't know. But again, in closing, I just want you to understand one thing. We are not out of this, but we have a gut check game coming up on Sunday with the Cowboys. This is our strength against their strength. We have been much improved against the run, and what Dallas loves to do is pound you, and it allows them to be very safe in their passing game with Dak Prescott. So the key is which one of those opposing forces wins out. If we could get the win at Dallas, we're 4-3, go on the road to Seattle and see what happens. But largely, this Dallas game, I think, is going to kind of set the tone for the rest of. I feel like it's going to set the tone for the rest of this season. But we got to figure out a way to do it. I don't care how we do it. We just got to figure out a way to do it. But anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks for bearing with me. And we'll talk to y'all next week after the Redskins beat the Cowboys. There you go.